The humidity in Kahului had a way of making everything feel heavy, including the bag of potting soil I was dragging across the gravel. I was halfway to the hibiscus when Mrs. Gable leaned over the fence, her sunglasses perched on the tip of her nose. She had a way of speaking that made every sentence sound like a shared secret, even when it was just about the weather. "I was so sorry to hear you two are taking a breather from the clinic," she said, her voice tilting with that practiced sympathy. "It's just so much for a woman to go through." I told Peter it was a wise move to just stop and breathe for a while. I stopped pulling the bag. The gravel shifted under my sneakers. "Taking a breather?" "Oh," she said, blinking. "Peter mentioned it. Last Tuesday, when he was helping me with my hedge trimmer, he said you'd both decided to hold off for a few months, to get your spirits back." I didn't answer her. I just nodded and told her the soil was getting heavy, and I moved toward the porch. I didn't think about it as I went inside. Not at first. Peter handled the clinic logistics, the insurance authorizations, the scheduling, the portal logins. He was the school office manager. He lived for the details, the forms, the precise timing of things. I trusted him with the calendar because I spent 10 hours a day managing a dining room full of people who couldn't decide between the mahi-mahi and the steak. I went into the kitchen to get some water. On the counter, tucked under a stack of mail, was a printout from the patient portal. Peter usually filed those in the blue folder in the office, but this one had been left out, curled at the edges. I picked it up. It wasn't a bill or a lab result. It was a summary of a telehealth consultation from 3 weeks ago. I scanned the notes. Patient requested discontinuation of current IVF protocol. Discussed limitations of further stimulation. Patient indicated preference to cease treatment for the remainder of the year. The patient was Peter. He had had a call with the coordinator while I was at the restaurant. When he'd come home that night, he told me the clinic was backlogged and that we were just in a waiting window for the next cycle of meds. He told me it was out of our hands, that the doctors were just slow. I heard the garage door rumble open. I didn't put the paper back. I stayed standing by the sink, the paper damp in my hand. Peter came in carrying a bag of groceries, looking exactly like the man I'd lived with for 15 years. The man who remembered to change the air filters and always knew where the passports were. He smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes, or maybe I was just seeing him differently. "Hey," he said, "did you see the mail?" "I saw the portal printout," I said. He didn't stop unloading the bags. He put the milk in the fridge and the eggs in the carton. "Oh, that. It was just a check-in." The coordinator was confused about the dates. "It says you requested to discontinue the protocol, Peter. It says you wanted to cease treatment for the year." He paused, a bunch of bananas still in his hand. He didn't look at me. "It's a technicality. The way they word things in the system is. It's not how it actually happened." I was just clarifying the timeline. "Mrs. Gable said you told her we were taking a breather." "Mrs. Gable is 80, he said, finally looking up. His voice was flat, the same tone he used when he was explaining a budget error at the school. "She hears what she wants to hear." "Why are you talking to her about our doctor?" He turned back to the groceries, leaving the space between us feeling wider than the kitchen. He didn't mention the portal note again. He just started putting the frozen peas in the freezer, one bag at a time. He finished with the peas and finally looked at me, his expression shifting into that patient, slightly tired mask he used when he was dealing with a difficult parent at the school. It was the look that usually made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable, the one overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. "I put the roast in at 4, he said, his voice returning to its normal, steady cadence. It should be ready in about 20 minutes. Do you want the glazed carrots or the steamed ones? I looked at the paper in my hand, then at him. The roast. He'd remembered the roast, and he'd timed it perfectly so we could eat the moment I got home from the restaurant. This was the Peter I relied on. The man who managed the invisible architecture of our lives so I didn't have to. He handled the taxes, the insurance, the oil changes, and the clinic. He was the one who kept the blue folder organized and the calendar updated. I had spent years letting him carry that weight because it felt like a gift, a way for him to show he was invested in the outcome. Carrots are fine, I said. I set the portal printout on the counter, face down. Dinner was quiet, though not the kind of quiet that feels like a fight. It was just the usual rhythm of our evening. He told me about a budget dispute with the district over new textbooks, and I told him about the new server who kept dropping the appetizer trays. We passed the salt. We talked about the weather. I watched him chew, wondering how a person could look at you across a dinner table and tell you that the doctors were slow when he had already told them to stop. After dinner, while Peter was in the living room starting the dishwasher, I went back to the kitchen. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who snooped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing a page of the story. I looked through the stack of mail again, the things he hadn't yet filed into the blue folder. Under a flyer for a local hardware sale, I found a small, white envelope from the clinic's billing department. It wasn't a portal notification, it was a physical statement. I opened it and scanned the line items. There was a charge for a final case summary and exit consultation. The date was from 2 weeks ago. The amount was small, just a consultation fee, but the wording was precise. Exit consultation, I walked into the living room. Peter was leaning against the counter, drying a glass. "What's an exit consultation?" I asked, holding up the bill. He didn't jump. He didn't even stop drying the glass. He just looked at the paper and then back at me, his brow furrowing in a way that looked genuine. "It's an administrative term, Amanda. They close the active file every few months to archive the data. It's just how their billing software handles the transition between cycles. I've never heard of a clinic charging for a case. Closure just to archive data," I said. "It's a new system," he replied. He stepped toward me and took the bill out of my hand, his touch light and familiar. "They're updating everything to a cloud-based portal. The billing codes are a mess. I spent an hour on the phone with them last week, just trying to get the insurance to cover the basic labs. It's all just noise." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the NAS was just the bureaucracy of a medical office, and that I was the one misreading the signals. He sounded so sure, so grounded in the boring reality of office management. I remembered a time, years ago, when he'd handled a crisis with his sister's kids with that same quiet certainty, stepping in to fix a mess he'd helped create without ever admitting he'd been part of the problem. He'd always thought he could protect people from the truth if the truth was too ugly to handle. I didn't argue. I just stood there while he walked the bill over to the blue folder and slid it inside, clicking the binder shut. "Go sit down," he said softly. "You've had a long shift." I went to the sofa and sat, listening to the hum. The next morning, the house felt like it was holding its breath. I woke up at 5, the air already thick and smelling of damp earth and salt. Peter was already in the kitchen, the coffee pot hissing. He had the table set for breakfast, 2 pieces of sourdough toast, a sliced mango, and my coffee exactly how I liked it. He looked at me and smiled. A small, easy expression that suggested the previous night had been nothing more than a brief lapse in communication. "I took your car in for the oil change," he said, sliding the plate toward me. "The shop had a cancellation at 8, so I just dropped it off. I'll pick it up on my way home from the school." "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. "I know. But the sticker was red, Amanda. I didn't want you worrying about it during your shift." That was the way it always worked. He anticipated the friction in my day and sanded it down before I even felt it. It was a kindness, usually, but as I chewed the mango, it felt like he was slowly erasing my ability to handle my own life. I remembered him talking about his father, how he'd spent years trying to make up for a childhood where every mistake was a catastrophe. Peter had spent his adulthood becoming the man who never let a mistake happen, the man who smoothed every wrinkle before anyone noticed the fabric was bunched. The restaurant was a disaster by noon. We had a party of 12 who had booked under a name that didn't exist in the system, and the air conditioning in the dining room was rattling like a tin can full of marbles. I was in the middle of a heated exchange with the kitchen manager about the special when Sarah, my lead server, stepped in. "I've already moved the 12 top to the patio," Sarah told me, her voice calm and flat. I gave them a round of complimentary appetizers to apologize for the wait, and I coordinated with the bar to get their drinks out in 5 minutes. "You don't need to worry about them." I blinked at her. I had spent the last 10 minutes spiraling, trying to figure out how to rearrange the floor plan without offending the regulars. Sarah had just seen the problem and solved it. I felt a strange flash of gratitude, followed by a hollow sensation in my chest. I was the general manager, but Sarah was the one who actually knew how to keep the room from collapsing. I spent the rest of the shift moving through the motions. I checked the inventory, I dealt with a broken wine glass, and I ignored the buzzing of my phone in my pocket. I didn't want to see a message from Peter telling me the car was ready or that he'd picked up my dry cleaning. I didn't want another piece of the invisible architecture he was building around me. When I finally got home, the house was dim. Peter was in the garden, watering the hibiscus. He looked peaceful, the hose arching a shimmering curtain of water over the red blooms. He didn't see me come in. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him. He looked like the man I had married, the steady, reliable partner who took care of the things I forgot. I walked into the hallway and saw the blue folder sitting on the entryway table. He hadn't put it away in the office. It was just there, a plastic rectangle of organized secrets. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to find another administrative term or a billing code. That meant we were giving up on something I still wanted. I went into the bedroom and started taking off my makeup. I could hear him coming up the stairs, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic. He entered the room and leaned over to kiss my shoulder. "I got the car back," he whispered, "and I called the insurance company about the clinic's new portal. They're going to send a corrected statement in the mail next week. It was just a glitch." He didn't wait for me to answer. He walked into the bathroom to start his shower, leaving the door open just a crack. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone. There was a text from him sent an hour ago. "Dinner is in the slow cooker. Roast beef and carrots. Love you." I remember the way the humidity felt on Sunday evening, like a damp blanket draped over the laundry room. Usually, that was my hour. I'd pull the button-downs from the dryer while they were still hot, line them up on the board, and spend the next 60 minutes pressing out every crease in Peter's work shirts. He hated the iron. He said it was too hot, that he could never get the collars to sit right, and that he always ended up burning his fingers or scorching the fabric. It was a small thing, a rescue from a chore he found irritating, but it was a ritual. I liked the steam and the repetitive motion. It felt like I was smoothing over the edges of our life, making sure everything looked crisp and controlled for the world. I stood there, looking at the pile of laundry in the plastic basket. I thought about the blue folder on the entryway table and the exit consultation that Peter had called a glitch. I thought about the way he'd timed the roast beef so perfectly, as if a well-cooked meal could fill the gap where the truth should have been. He had spent the last few days being the most helpful version of himself, picking up my car, handling the insurance, managing the noise of the clinic, and all of it felt like a layer of starch, stiffening the reality of our marriage so it wouldn't wrinkle. I didn't reach for the iron. I just stood there, watching a small bead of condensation drip down the side of the washer. I wondered when I had decided that my role was to be the one who smoothed things. I thought back to when we first started the treatments, the way he'd taken over the scheduling with such efficiency. I had been so relieved. I remember telling him, I can't keep track of all these windows and blood draws. And he'd just smiled and told me to focus on the restaurant. He'd made it look like a gift, but standing in the laundry room, it felt more like he'd just taken the map away from me so I wouldn't notice we were driving in a different direction. Did you find the remote? Peter asked. He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He was wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts, looking relaxed, his expression open and easy. I think I left it by the lamp, but I can't remember if I moved it when I was dusting. I haven't seen it, I said. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the pile of shirts. Right, no worries. He paused, his gaze shifting to the laundry basket. You doing the shirts now? I think I might need that light blue one for the staff meeting tomorrow. The one with the subtle stripe. I looked at the blue shirt, crumpled at the bottom of the basket. It looked pathetic, a heap of fabric that had lost its shape. I thought about the exit consultation again. I thought about the way he'd told Mrs. Gable we were taking a breather, a phrase that sounded so much like something a husband says when he's decided the struggle is no longer worth the cost, without bothering to ask his wife if she agreed. I'm not really in the mood to iron, I said. Peter blinked. He didn't move from the doorway. You're not? No. Oh, okay. He sounded confused, but not angry. He just sounded like he was trying to figure out which part of the routine had broken. Do you want me to try? I mean, I'll probably mess up the collars, but I can give it a shot if you're tired. It was the same offer, the same rescue. He was offering to do the thing he was bad at, just so I wouldn't have to feel the guilt of not doing it for him. He was trying to smooth the wrinkle I had just created. No, I said, finally looking at him. You don't have to do it. Just find a shirt that isn't too wrinkled. He stared at me for a second, his mouth slightly open, as if he were waiting for the punchline or the explanation. When neither came, he just nodded slowly. Right, okay. I'll just check the closet. He turned and walked away, his footsteps receding down the hall. I stayed in the laundry room, the air thick and smelling of dryer sheets, and I left the shirts exactly where they were, piled in the basket. Messy and unresolved. Monday morning arrived with a low, gray ceiling that promised rain but only delivered a suffocating dampness. I woke up and heard the rhythmic, metallic clinking of the iron being set up in the laundry room. Peter had actually tried. I stayed in bed for a few minutes, listening to the hiss of steam and the occasional thud of the board shifting. He wasn't a man of intuitive motions. He approached the iron like he approached a spreadsheet, with a rigid, misplaced confidence that usually ended in a mistake. When I finally walked into the kitchen, the smell of scorched cotton was faint but present. Peter was standing by the counter, already dressed for the day. He was wearing the light blue striped shirt, but it looked like he'd slept in it. The collar was puckered on the left side, and there were deep, diagonal creases running across his chest that no amount of steam could have flattened. He looked frayed, a version of himself that didn't fit the image of the man who managed the district's textbooks and the blue folder. "I couldn't quite get the pleats," he said, not looking at me as he poured the coffee. "I think the iron might be losing heat. I noticed it felt a bit uneven." "It's not the iron, Peter," I said. "Anyway," he continued, his voice sliding back into that steady, administrative tone, "I have that staff meeting at 9. The principal wants a full breakdown of the supply budget by noon, so I might be a little late getting home. Do you think you could check the mail around 3? I'm expecting that corrected statement from the clinic." He said it so casually, as if the corrected statement was a foregone conclusion, a fact already written into the ledger of our lives. He was trying to overwrite the portal printout and the exit consultation bill with a new, cleaner narrative. He was managing the nuds again, attempting to smooth the wrinkle in our history the same way he'd failed to smooth the fabric of his shirt. "I'll check it," I said. "Great." He smiled, but it was a tight, tentative thing. "I think I'll just leave the shirt as it is. No one really notices the clothes once the meeting starts." I watched him move around the kitchen, his movements efficient and practiced. He packed his lunch, checked his briefcase, and set his keys by the door. For a moment, I thought about telling him that I didn't care about the shirt, that the shirt was the only thing in the house that actually looked the way I felt. I wanted to ask him why he thought a corrected piece of paper would change the fact that he had made a decision for both of us in a private phone call. But the habit of 15 years is a heavy thing. I found myself reaching for the coffee pot, stepping into the space he'd cleared for me, falling back into the choreography of a marriage that felt like it was being performed by two people who had forgotten the script. "Do you have your badge?" I asked. He paused, patting his pockets. "Oh, right, it's on the dresser." He hurried back into the bedroom. While he was gone, I looked at the laundry basket still sitting in the hallway. The other shirts were still there, a tangled heap of white and blue. By then, I knew Peter wasn't actually angry that I'd stopped ironing. He was just confused. To him, the ritual was a service, a gear in the machine that kept the house running. He didn't see the refusal as a protest. He saw it as a mechanical failure. He came back into the room, badge clipped to his belt, looking tired. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and for a second, I felt the familiar urge to lean into him, to let him handle the world so I didn't have to. "I'll see you tonight," he said. "I'll probably pick up some takeout on the way home. You don't have to worry about dinner." "I can handle dinner," I said. He blinked, his expression flickering. "I just thought, since you've had a long week." "I'm fine," I said. He stood there for a beat too long, his hand still resting on the doorframe. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flash of something that looked like genuine uncertainty. He didn't know how to navigate a world where I didn't want to be rescued. "Okay," he said softly. "Takeout is always there if you change your mind." He left, and I heard the garage door rumble shut. I walked over to the laundry basket and picked up one of the white shirts. I held it up to the light, seeing the deep, stubborn creases in the fabric, and I didn't move to fix them. Tuesday afternoon was a blur of lunch rushes and a leaking soda fountain that left the floor tacky. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sky had turned that bruised purple color that usually precedes a downpour. I walked to the mailbox, my shoes clicking on the pavement, and found the white envelope from the clinic waiting for me. I didn't open it right away. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table, right next to a bowl of ripening bananas. I sat there for a few minutes, just looking at the return address. I remember thinking that if I didn't open it, the glitch would remain a possibility. As long as the envelope was sealed, Peter's version of the story, the one where the billing codes were a mess and the portal was lying, could still be the truth. When I finally tore it open, there was no long letter of apology or a detailed explanation of a software error. It was just a revised statement. At the top, in a small gray font, it read, "Account status." Inactive below that, the exit consultation fee was still there, but it had been moved to a different column. There was no mention of a waiting window or a backlog. It was just a clean, professional record of a closed file. I heard the garage door open. Peter came in, smelling like the school, chalk dust and old floor wax. He looked energized, his tie loosened, his face bright. "Did it come?" he asked, dropping his keys on the counter. The corrected statement. "Did they fix the code?" "I got it," I said. I didn't move the paper. He stepped closer, leaning over the table to look. He scanned the page quickly, his eyes darting across the line items. He didn't flinch when he saw the word innovative. "See," he said, his voice light. "I told you. They just had to move the charge to the correct billing cycle. Inactive just means we aren't in an active stimulation phase. It's a status, Amanda, not a permanent state. It's just how the system labels the off months." I looked at him, and for a second I actually felt myself starting to believe him. He sounded so sure. He had that same tone he'd used when he'd convinced the school board to approve the new textbooks, despite the budget shortfall. A blend of technical jargon and absolute confidence that made you feel like you were the one who didn't understand how things worked. I remember thinking, maybe I am overthinking this. Maybe he really did just spend an hour on the phone fixing a clerical error. But the portal said you requested to discontinue, I said. My voice sounded small, even to me. "The portal is a mess," he replied, reaching out to pat my hand. His touch was warm, familiar. "I probably told them to stop the current cycle so we could reset the billing. It's a workaround. I did it to save us the hassle of the insurance disputes. You know how they are with the authorizations." He didn't wait for me to ask what a workaround meant in the context of our fertility. He just picked up the statement and walked toward the entryway table. "I'll put this in the folder," he said. "Everything is squared away now. We can just relax for a bit and wait for the next window." I watched him slide the paper into the blue folder and click the binder shut. The sound was final, a small plastic snap that seemed to seal the conversation. He turned back to me and smiled. "I thought I'd pick up some poke bowls for dinner," he said. "The place on the corner. Do you want the spicy tuna or the salmon?" "I'm not hungry," I said. He paused, his hand still on the folder. "You didn't eat much at lunch, did you? I can get you something light. A side of seaweed salad? I'm just not hungry, Peter." He stared at me for a moment, his expression shifting from helpful to slightly perplexed. He didn't know how to handle a request that wasn't a problem to be solved. He stood there in the quiet of the kitchen, the humming of the refrigerator filling the space between us, and for the first time, he didn't have a workaround. "Okay," he said softly. "I'll just get mine, then." He walked out to the car, and I stayed in the kitchen, looking at the blue folder. I didn't move it. I just stood there, listening to the first few drops of rain hit the roof. Peter came back 20 minutes later with 2 poke bowls and a side of seaweed salad. The rain had started in earnest, a steady, drumming sound that filled the kitchen. He set the food on the table, the plastic containers fogging up in the humidity. "I got the spicy tuna for you," he said, "and the salmon for me. I thought maybe we could just put on a movie and forget about the clinic for a few days. Let the dust settle." I didn't look at the food. I looked at the blue folder, still sitting on the entryway table. "I can't do the noise anymore." He paused, a chopstick in his hand. "What noise?" "The workarounds, the glitches, the administrative terms." I finally looked at him. He looked so ordinary, just a man in a damp shirt who had bought dinner. "You decided we were done. You told the doctor we were done. And then you spent 2 weeks pretending the system was lying to me." "I was trying to protect you," he said. His voice was already shifting, moving into that protective, managing tone. "You were so stressed at the restaurant. I didn't want to add to it until I had a plan to fix the billing, to get us back in the window." "There is no window," I said. "The file is inactive. We can reactivate it. I'll call them tomorrow. I'll handle the paperwork." He was still trying to manage the outcome. He was treating the end of my trust like a budget error that could be corrected with a few phone calls and a revised spreadsheet. By then, I knew he didn't actually see the lie as the problem. He saw the discovery of the lie as the problem. To Peter, the success of the workaround was the goal, regardless of who was being worked around. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the poke bowls. I just felt a profound, heavy tiredness, the kind that comes after a double shift when the dishwasher breaks and the staff is quitting. "I want you to stay in the guest room," I said. He blinked. "What? Why?" "Amanda, let's just talk about this. We can go to a specialist or maybe a counselor. Guest room, Peter." He didn't argue, not because he agreed, but because he was trying to figure out the new rules of the engagement. He spent the next hour moving his toiletries and a few changes of clothes into the small room at the end of the hall. He did it efficiently, folding his things neatly, as if the act of organizing his departure from our bed could somehow make the transition a managed process. The next few weeks were a series of quiet administrative shifts. We didn't have a grand confrontation. Instead, we had conversations about the mortgage and the car insurance, spoken in the same flat, polite tones we used with strangers. I stopped ironing his shirts entirely. He started wearing polo shirts that looked vaguely crumpled, but he didn't mention it. He stopped asking about my day at the restaurant, and I stopped telling him about the kitchen. The separation became a matter of logistics. He found a small rental near the school, a place that was probably too expensive, but had a very organized closet. On the day he moved the last of his boxes, the humidity had finally broken, leaving the air crisp and smelling of wet pavement. He stood in the entryway, his keys in his hand. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I had trusted with the blue folder. "I left a list on the counter," he said.